My crazy mother-in-law stole my antique key collection, so I called the police and had her arrested. My wife threatened to leave me if I insisted on pressing charges, so I filed for divorce myself. Plus, 3 updates. My mother-in-law is spoiled beyond belief, and my wife's indulgence has put a lot of strain on our marriage lately. She recently came to our house wanting me to buy her a new phone because hers was 2 years old and out of date. She threw a fit when I refused, falling to the floor and pounding her fists on the hardwood floor. I still refused, so she got up and left, but not before yelling that she could now have the phone. I have a collection of antique skeleton keys worth thousands, and I kept them all in a locked display cabinet. So a few days ago, I came home to find the cabinet broken into and my entire collection missing. I checked the CCTV and saw my mother-in-law using a crowbar to break into the cabinet. I immediately called her and demanded my collection back, but she said she had already sold everything at the pawn shop and spent the money on a new phone. She said it was my fault because I hadn't bought her a phone. My wife seemed to be on my side when I told her, until I told her I was going to the police. She begged me to back off and even suggested I start a new collection. I refused to let go because not only are these keys expensive, they are irreplaceable. I had spent 10 years building this collection, but my wife kept throwing tantrums, telling me to just let it go. Now, to answer the questions before you ask, how did my mother-in-law get into the house? My wife single-handedly gave her the key when we moved in. That's why. Anyway, back to what happened that day. I finally made a decision and contacted the police. They came and took my statement a little over an hour after I called the non-emergency line. I had the video footage and documentation of my collection ready, as well as some text messages that I had specifically gotten from my mother-in-law to get her to confess. I wanted as much evidence as possible so she couldn't lie to the police. When I wrote to her demanding my collection back, she actually laughed and said she would never give it back, and even bragged that she thought I was a pathetic son-in-law and my key collection was tasteless. Anyway, I told her to at least tell me what pawn shop she sold the keys to so I could buy them back and how much she got paid for them, and the idiot happily admitted it in a text right away. I had everything I needed for the police before they even arrived. The cops took the whole thing more seriously than I thought. I was worried they would call it a civil case since the thief was my mother-in-law and had a key to the house, but they arrested her soon after and the police went to the pawn shop before it closed to retrieve my collection. I got everything back from the police a couple of days later, and in the meantime, I've put the collection in a safe, secure place where no one can get to it. The pawn shop turned over the entire key collection to the police pretty quickly, like it was a sack of hot potatoes. I carefully checked every important key that was returned, and as far as I could tell, everything was there. It was a huge relief. I took the day off from work and barely slept for 2 days because of the whole ordeal. Also, the cabinet that my mother-in-law broke into is practically a lost cause, as she mangled the lock and doors while trying to force it open. Luckily, it wasn't an antique, just something I bought used for $50, so I'll just take it to the dump sooner or later. From her text messages before I knew it, my mother-in-law had sold the entire collection to a pawn shop for a whopping $300 for a collection of hundreds of antique keys worth between $2 and $3 grand. That low amount was a punch to the gut. The appraiser probably knew how valuable the collection as a whole could be. I mean, it's not like it was a jackpot, but money is money, especially when a silly little lady like that comes in with a box of goodies. Anyone else hear Mr. Krabs laughing? Anyway, the cost of paying for the damage to the store should have been on my mother-in-law, but my wife paid them out of our joint account instead. According to the store owner, the mother-in-law told them that the key collection belonged to her late husband, and she was tired of having the entire collection sitting in storage, so they believed her. But to be perfectly clear, she is not a widow. Her husband divorced her and left the country about 15 years ago. The mother-in-law lives on Social Security and food stamps. She also holds garage sales every few months and would often ask for our soda and beer cans as deposits for recycling them. The mother-in-law does not drive. She gets around on an electric scooter that tows a bike trailer. She lives in a house that she paid for a long time ago and wouldn't have financial problems if she didn't spend more each month, and she always counts on my wife to cover her expenses when she runs out of money. My wife and I had a huge fight when she came home because I had arrested her mother. But I told her I had enough of her enabling her toxic mother. I said that as soon as I could, I would change the locks and lock her mother out of the house. And I also said that we would either go to marriage counseling or I would see a lawyer to consult on separation options. I thought my wife would beg me not to do it, but instead she just called me horrible, packed her bags, and went to a motel. I just sat on the couch and let her go. She repeatedly looked like she was expecting me to ask her to stay, but I didn't. In the morning, she texted me that she was going to bail her mother out of jail and wanted me to wire her money to do so, since I was the one who arrested her mother. When I refused, all I got was a sarcastic, "Wow, Zia." Soon after, I had a hunch and checked the joint bank account balance, and my wife had withdrawn a lot of money. I wasn't sure if it was all for bail, so I called the pawn shop later. The owner confirmed that my wife had been there and had given him back the $300 he had paid her mother for the keys. He was also pretty angry and said he never wanted either of us in his store again. I understood his anger, and, strangely enough, I talked to this guy for quite a while, and he realized that I had nothing to do with this madness. I tried calling and texting my wife for hours, but she didn't answer. That evening, I managed to find her. I knew which motel she would probably go to, and I was right. It was cheap and close. I found her car and then found out which room she was in. She looked absolutely shocked to see me when she opened the door. I confronted her about the money she spent from our joint account. She basically said that since I refused to pay her mother's bail after I arrested her mother, she got the money from me another way, and then arrogantly stated that she would not return the money to the joint account this time, and told me that it was my karma before slamming the door in my face, and then through the door said that she would call the police if I didn't leave. The arrogant look she gave me reminded me of nasty teenagers when they get their way. It really pissed me off. I already knew my marriage was pretty much over, but that night it really got to me. I sat for a long time with old video games and Coke to think about my future. The house is rented, so I will not be renewing my half of the lease and will be looking for an apartment soon. The last month of the lease is March, but I may move out sooner depending on how soon I find an apartment. We don't have kids yet, thank goodness, so that's another thing I have in my favor right now. The next day, I changed the locks on the house and withdrew all my money from the joint bank account and stopped all automatic payments to and from it. I made sure to only take the amount of money I had deposited into the account. There was still more than enough in the account to break even and leave the minimum required balance in the account. In any case, the cost of my mother-in-law's deposit and the reimbursement to the pawn shop are now entirely on my wife. And I don't think she's noticed yet, but it should be soon. I've been to a couple different divorce lawyers, and I've chosen the second one because the first one only seemed interested in getting a paycheck. I'm filing for divorce soon. I loved my wife, but it's clear she didn't love me, so I can't stay with her. Let her be alone with her thief of a mother. We both make comparable incomes, so I'm going to fight for a clean split. This woman didn't deserve me, and I fell for her charade. She didn't want a husband, she wanted insurance. I will pursue any charges against her mother. I'll update again when something happens, but I'll be crystal clear, I will not change my mind. My soon-to-be ex-wife can beg and love me all she wants, if she even bothers. I was never her number one, and I am not going to settle for being number two in my own marriage. It's over. Update: it didn't take me long to find and hire a divorce lawyer, and she is tough. Yes, my lawyer is a woman, and she seems very good at her job. She asked me several times if I was sure I wanted to do this, but once I explained my whole story and showed her some evidence, she agreed with me when I said I wanted to get started ASAP, and she got to work. Oh, this divorce is going to cost me, but I don't care. I will rebuild my savings later as a free man. I didn't even want to rent the house I live in now. My wife insisted on it. I would be happy to stay in our old apartment we used to rent until we could buy a house together. But that is obviously never going to happen. I will pay a lot less rent when we break up. Before she came home, she spent time in a cheap motel while she was bailing her mother out of jail, and even threatened to call the police when I went to visit her there. I changed the locks with my landlord's permission while she was still out, and texted her to say it was done, but apparently she didn't bother to look because she never responded. So when she got home, she started banging on the door and screaming for me to let her in. I just watched her through the doorbell camera and let her go on for a while before she finally called me on the phone. I was already walking home from dinner with my best friend when she called, and I pointed out the text message she hadn't bothered to read. When I got home to let her in, she was puffy-cheeked, teary-eyed, and red-faced. I had a new key ready and told her that if she gave her mother a copy again, I would notify our landlord, since they were already pretty pissed that she gave her mother a key in the first place. I'm not sure what the landlord could have done, but it was enough to get my wife to comply for now. Plus, I wasn't planning on living here for long anyway. My mother-in-law still believes she has done nothing wrong and plays the victim to my wife at every opportunity. She is no longer allowed to visit for obvious reasons, and I have been called a monster by both her and my wife on multiple occasions. I have never been so glad my mother-in-law has no friends, because she would then tell everyone her twisted version of the story to make me look like the villain. I just know that. She has been told how much my key collection is worth and what criminal charges she could face, even though my collection was returned completely undamaged, so the charges may be reduced. I would like to see her get a decent sentence at the very least, but I don't expect the system to take everything down on a manipulator like her. As I mentioned in my previous post, my wife also paid her mother's deposit and what she owed the pawn shop with the money in our joint account, and then arrogantly told me she wouldn't pay the money back. It was basically a terrible move and her only way of trying to pass the entire cost on to me. I have since withdrawn everything from that account and stopped all future payments to it, so she can't spend my money too. And I have changed the passwords to just about everything. My wife was furious when she finally checked the account a couple of days ago, because that meant what she paid for Mill's deposit and the pawn shop reimbursement was only her money, and now she no longer had access to my funds to supplement hers. I simply ignored her hysteria and went to my home office to watch anime on my computer. She kept knocking on the door, demanding that I talk to her. I simply remained silent and put on my headphones. My wife repeatedly demanded that I drop all the accusations against her mother, and even said that if I really loved her, I would not only stop all this, but also cover the expenses. When I continued to refuse, she moved into the spare bedroom. She initially tried to kick me out of the master bedroom, but I made it clear that I would not give up the master bedroom when she was in the wrong. She tried to start taking my things out, but I simply blocked her by pointing my finger in her face and saying no, like I was talking to a dog. She finally started crying and said I was putting her down, but I didn't care. Then, to add to her lie, she confessed to me out of pure spite that before all this mess started, she was planning on letting her mother move in with us permanently soon because of the state of her warehouse home. She bragged that she was just going to move her in while I was at work. I told her that we were supposed to be equal partners before all this, and I was fed up with her one-sided decision-making, and as long as I was paying 50% of the rent, her mother would not be living here, and if she tried, I would immediately throw out all of her mother's things. My wife looked like she wanted to explode, and went off to get drinks and talk loudly to her mother in the kitchen. I just started moving her stuff out of the master bedroom and left it in another room for her. I also put a new lock on the master bedroom door. I was served divorce papers at her work, which she said made her very embarrassed in front of her coworkers, and she got mad at me again when she got home. Apparently, she didn't take my threats of divorce seriously until she had those papers in her hands. She said I couldn't do it, but I told her I had had enough. she made it clear where she really stood. I told her I learned a pretty interesting phrase online. When people show you who they really are, believe them. And she clearly showed me who she really is. And that is not the woman I fell in love with. This woman disappeared and was replaced by a spoiled mama's girl who refuses to act her age as soon as we got married, making it obvious she did it on purpose. At this point, I don't think she ever loved me, just my wallet. I can't stay married to a woman who lied to me to get married and then started screaming at me that she wasn't a gold digger. So I asked her if she would be inclined to stay with me if I did all the same things to her. She tried to deny it at first, then looked around like she was looking for a better answer, then just started gaslighting to deflect attention as usual. But I was having none of it. I told her right then and there that I would not renew the lease on the house with her because I did not want to live with a bratty child I could not trust. And if she wanted to keep the house, she could start a new lease to put her mother there when I left. That was when the real tears started. She said I was ruining our family, and I said what family, and pointed out that we had no children, and her mother was more important to her than me. We had no family. Then I just left. She cried loudly in the living room for hours, but I ignored her. Now she is completely silent and will not look me in the eye. I actually like that, which only makes her angrier. As an added bonus, I warned my current landlord about my wife's desire to put her mother there. I gave him all the information I had about my mother-in-law, the state of her warehouse house, and how much of a cheat and a mama's girl my wife was, and warned him that if he allowed my mother-in-law to live in any property he owned, she would turn it into a complete mess. He thanked me for telling him, and now he will not allow my wife to renew the lease on her own. If she tries, he will be advertising the property soon. She has no idea yet, and would probably only be able to afford the house with the help of her mother. One more thing. Someone warned me yesterday to remove my name completely from the joint bank account so that I would not be held responsible for any overdrafts. I took note and went to the bank to do so. It only took a few minutes and the bank is a 10-minute drive away. All is well. I have been working from home lately, so I have had time. All the bank statements have already been printed and given to my lawyer, so I can wash my hands of it. Update 2. After about a week of giving her the silent treatment, my wife had enough and started love-bombing me. She even tried to cook me dinner and get me drunk. I told her while she was cooking that I would not touch anything she made because, firstly, she is a terrible cook, and secondly, I don't trust her not to put something in my food. The burgers she made were overcooked, and I left them alone as well as the alcohol she provided. I mean, the beer was already open. She started crying and said I was mean for not eating her food, and I coolly said it was because I didn't trust her anymore. She countered that it wasn't like she had cheated on me or anything. I responded that she had cheated on me almost as much because her mother had always been more important to her than me, the man she had married. You can't save a marriage by treating your spouse as secondary. My wife changed the subject, crying again, and begging me to stop the divorce so we could get the marriage counseling I wanted, and she would never try to move her mother in with us. I said it was too late. She had had her chance, and she had hopelessly blown it. She had already made it clear where she would always stand. For the last 2 years, she has made no effort to be a better person and has only been more polite in public. Why would I stay in such a toxic relationship? She should have answered honestly at least once and admitted that she would probably leave me if I did the same to her, but she still tried to convince me not to get a divorce and that we could work things out. I had to just leave and go back to the office. My wife did not stop and even tried to initiate intimacy several times. She walked around the house in her underwear a lot, and even in my favorite one. Nothing but a lacy apron. She hasn't done this for me since our honeymoon, even when I asked. She tried to touch me in places, ran her fingers through my hair, and got down on her knees to seduce me. I didn't fall for her tricks and stoically pushed away. Eventually, she started gaslighting me with the question, "Don't you like me?" I told her I used to, but I just can't look at her like that anymore. My wife left me alone to get a stiff drink after I said that and ended up throwing up in the kitchen. I wouldn't be surprised if she tried to get me pregnant or set me up at this point. I even locked the door when I sleep and installed a hidden camera in the room. I want to leave this house, but I can't leave until I can get to my new place. Later, my wife redoubled her efforts, crying when nothing worked for me and begging me again not to get a divorce. But I had already found an apartment that would be available sometime in early to mid-March. I had also notified all the utilities of the change. My wife was now even more panicked because she would have to find an apartment ASAP. I didn't really care where it ended up. I was just glad that I would soon be out of this house. I had also made sure not to tell her where my future apartment was, and she had tried 3 times to get that information from me. Once my new apartment was ready, I would start moving things in. I would take the bed from the guest room when I moved out. I bought it after all, and it will be easier to move since it is a double bed, and the one in the master bedroom is a king. I am a light sleeper, so a comfortable bed is a must. My wife can keep most of the furniture. She can either leave it for the next tenant or sell it. I don't care. The apartment I am moving into is a studio apartment. The previous tenant left it in disrepair, so it needs some work. But I chose this apartment because not only will the rent be much lower than the house, but I will be much closer to my work. Like I could walk or bike to work from there, and I probably will. I haven't ridden a bike in years because my wife never learned how. Another thing she's been holding me back from. So when I move out, one of the first things I'll do is buy a bike. Update 3. A few months ago, I anonymously reported my mother-in-law as a serious hoarder. Someone here suggested that I report my mother-in-law's hoarding to the fire department, and I decided to do it because I was angry and wanted revenge on her for stealing my collection and making my life hell. My mother-in-law had been hoarding junk in her house since my wife was a teenager. The house was filled almost to the brim with rotting garbage and was infested with rodents. I actually saw rats in there. I called the city from the number I had first Googled. Nothing came up as it had been weeks, but apparently someone had checked because my mother-in-law's house had been checked. The house was in even worse shape than I thought. Not only was it a serious fire hazard to itself and the surrounding area and had a rodent infestation, but there were some exposed electrical wires, a leaky roof that had been faulty for years, causing severe rot and black mold. The house didn't look too bad from the outside, and it was in a neighborhood full of older houses that looked similar, so no one had probably reported it before me. My frustrations. My wife figured I was the one who reported her mother, given the timing and everything. She came home and told me everything her mother had told the inspector, and how her mother was likely to lose the house, but it was only a matter of time before something like that happened if I didn't report her mother. My wife screamed at me that I was a horrible, lying person. I asked her if she wanted to be the pot or the kettle, and then reminded her of all the reasons we were breaking up. I finally lost my temper and screamed at her, telling her that her indulgence of her mother had caused it. Her attitude about the theft of my irreplaceable skeleton key collection that I had spent a decade building was unimportant had caused it, and her selfish, unilateral decision-making and bratty child behavior since we were married had caused it. A couple should make decisions together, not just her making them for both of us without even asking my opinion. So I made a unilateral decision myself this time and reported your mother, which needed to be reported because it was a danger to her and others. I told my wife that I was tired of just putting up with it and letting it all go while they acted like I was the bad guy and trampled on me. Her mother would never get anything from me again, and maybe she wouldn't be so crazy when she stopped living in a house full of rotting garbage fumes, rodent excrement, and black damn mold. My wife just walked away, sobbing and cursing at me. Yeah, I know, I went too far. I've become as petty as she is. I made the call because I was angry, but I couldn't go back on that decision once I did it. The mother-in-law demanded that the wife pay for the costs of cleaning and renovating the house, but she couldn't afford it from what I heard. The mother-in-law pounced on her with her demands, telling her to get the money any way she could, even demanding that I pay for it since I was the one who reported the house. She even told me to sue me, but the wife told her that it wouldn't work. The house was in exceptionally bad shape. Rotting waste, exposed wires, a leaky roof, rot, and black mold. No one should live in a place like that. When the wife tried to tell her mother that she couldn't afford to pay for the cleaning and renovating the house, her mother actually attacked her like a wild animal. She hit and scratched her several times and tried to pull out her hair. That's when it happened. The mother-in-law had a heart attack on the spot. The attack on her daughter must have triggered it. The wife called 911 looking for aspirin in the house, but by the time help arrived, her mother was dead. The wife came home with a police officer, and for some reason she was absolutely furious, screaming at me about what had happened to her mother. She said it was all my fault, and in all her attacks, I learned that her mother had a weak heart. That's the real reason she was on disability. The police officer had to pull the wife off me, and she fell on the couch, sobbing. I hated my mother-in-law with a passion, but I didn't try to take her life. I still feel a huge amount of guilt about it. From what the police officer and my wife told me, I made up the story and later wrote it down, but I just couldn't bring myself to publish it. I was still racked with guilt the night I found out my mother-in-law had passed away. My wife was able to calm down enough to talk to the officer more clearly about what had happened, but she also kept switching back and forth between blaming herself and blaming me. I asked her across the room why I had never been told about her mother's heart condition, and she screamed that it was none of my damn business. But that explained why my mother-in-law had dramatically put her hand to her chest and cried so many times when she didn't get her way. My wife ended up going crazy in the bathroom she had been using since we started sleeping apart. She asked the cop to leave her alone for a minute and then just went crazy. She came out a few minutes later looking angry but calm, then told me I would clean up the mess. She packed up her things again and left the house for a motel, telling me she wouldn't be back unless she got her stuff. I was so guilt-ridden I could barely function for days and had to take time off work for stress migraines. I basically spent 3 days on the couch, drugged up, but I pulled myself together after that. My friends tell me it wasn't my fault. I didn't know, and my mother-in-law was crazy. Anyway, what's done is done, and I'll have to live with it.